Whatever happened, it threw me to the floor, and that's when everything started happening.
From InfoWars' sister site, Prison Planet, we have this article. CIA to monitor internet chatter for anti-government sentiment. This was on October the 20th. And the 2005 movie V for Vendetta, a film about a totalitarian society ruled by a fascist government with an iron surveillance fist, there's a scene where state spooks drive down a residential street with a gadget that records the conversations people are having inside their homes and gives them a rating on how antagonistic towards the authorities they are. A frighteningly similar scenario is now on the horizon with the news that the CIA's investment arm in QTEL is putting cash into Visible Technologies, a company that monitors the output of social media, in order to read your blog posts, keep track of your Twitter updates, even check out your book reviews on Amazon, reports Wired News. Of course, the fact that the U.S. government and the military have been overloading the internet with pro-war propaganda and trolls who are paid to cheerlead for the war on terror and attack critics is an admitted part of their cyber warfare agenda, and Israel has done the same. And this is all highlighted with links to the sources for those claims. However, the prospect of the CIA closely monitoring social networking websites, whose content largely comprises of inane gossip and sophomoric blabber, shows just how afraid the establishment is of rising popular opposition to their agenda. Visible crawls over 500,000 Web 2.0 sites a day, scraping more than 1 million posts and conversations taking place on blogs, online forums, Flickr, YouTube, Twitter, and Amazon. Customers get customized real-time feeds of what's being said on these sites, based on series of keywords, according to Wired. The software scores whether each post is positive, neutral, or negative on a particular topic and can judge who the most influential poster is in a conversation, for example, on a comment board or forum. According to InQTEL, it wants to use the technology to see how international issues are playing out in foreign media. But as the report notes, of course, such a tool can be pointed inward at domestic bloggers or tweeters. Visible already keeps tabs on Web 2.0 sites for Dell, AT&T, and Verizon. For Microsoft, the company is monitoring the buzz on its Windows 7 rollout. For spam maker Hormel, Visible is tracking animal rights activists' online campaigns against the company. Stephen Aftergood of the Federation of American Scientists warns that the software could be used to track and target critics of the government, as well as political figures and journalists. Intelligence agencies or employees might be tempted to use the tools at their disposal to compile information on political figures, critics, journalists, or others, and to exploit such information for political advantage, Aftergood told Wired. Visible Chief Executive Officer Dan Vitra said that the CIA was just one of several government clients that were using the technology and that more were on the horizon. And speaking of V for Vendetta and fascist governments in the UK, we have this story from the UK on October 18th from The Guardian by Vikram Dodd. UK, government anti-terrorism strategy spies on innocent. The government program aimed at preventing Muslims from being lured into violent extremism is being used to gather intelligence about innocent people who are not suspected of involvement in terrorism, The Guardian has learned. The information the authorities are trying to find out includes political and religious views, information on mental health, sexual activity, and associates, and other sensitive information, according to documents seen by The Guardian. Other documents reveal that the intelligence and information can be stored until the people concerned reach the age of 100. Tonight, Shami Chakrabarti, director of Liberty, branded it the biggest spying program in Britain in modern times and an affront to civil liberties. The intelligence is being gathered as part of the strategy Preventing Violent Extremism, PREVENT for short. It was launched 3 years ago to stop people from being lured into al-Qaeda ideology and committing acts of terrorism. The government and police have reportedly denied that the £140 million program is a cover for spying on Muslims in Britain, but sources directly involved in running PREVENT schemes say it involves gathering intelligence about the thoughts and beliefs of Muslims who are not involved in criminal activity. Instances around the country include: in the Midlands, funding for a mental health project to help Muslims was linked to information about individuals being passed to the authorities. In a college in northern England, a student who attended a meeting about Gaza was reported by one lecturer as a potential extremist. He was found not to be. A 9-year-old boy in East London who was referred to the authorities after allegedly showing signs of extremism, the youngest case known in Britain. He was deprogrammed according to a source with knowledge of the case. Within the last month, one new youth project in London alleged it was being pressured by the Metropolitan Police to provide names and details of Muslim youngsters as a condition of funding. None of the young Muslims have any known terrorist history. In one London borough, those working with youngsters were told to add information to databases they hold to highlight which youths were Muslim. They were also asked to provide information to be shared with the police about which streets and areas Muslim youngsters could be found on. In Birmingham, the program manager for Prevent is in fact a senior counter-terrorism police officer. Paul Marriott has been seconded to work in the Equalities Division of Britain's biggest council. In Blackburn, at least 80 people were reported to the authorities for showing signs of extremism. They were referred to the Channel Project part of Prevent. A youth project manager alleges his refusal to provide intelligence led to the police spreading false rumors and trying to smear him and his organization. One source who has been involved in Whitehall discussions on counterterrorism said, "There is no doubt Prevent is in part about gathering intelligence on people's thoughts and beliefs. No doubt." He added that the authorities feared they'd be lynched if they admitted Prevent included spying.
Mr. Speaker, if there's one thing the federal government is really good at, it's wasting money. And thanks to the so-called stimulus bill, there are millions of citizen dollars floating around loose, being blown by the wind of the wastocrats. The money's not being used to create permanent jobs in the private sector. State governments are using stimulus money for their own pet programs. But states are also required to put up stimulus signs where no projects have even started. One New Hampshire community was told if they didn't put up a government sign, they wouldn't get any money. Pay for the stimulus boondoggle PR blitz or no funds. And these signs cost taxpayers up to $2,000 apiece. Now here's one of those signs. The feds are trying to convince people that the stimulus is a success. Of course, there's no work taking place below it. It's easier to create million-dollar public relations signs than it is to create real jobs. The PR propaganda campaign by the federal government claiming the stimulus plan is working is an expensive myth, and that's just the way it is.
Moving on to economic news, we have a moment of candor from the Vice President. This is from ABC News on October 19th. VP Biden, for the millions of Americans without jobs, the U.S. economy is in a depression. This is by Karen Travers. In recent weeks, Vice President Joe Biden has said that the U.S. economy has been in what he calls a great recession, and has stressed that it is not a depression, echoing the general consensus of the nation's economists. But today, the Vice President took some liberty with the economic terms to illustrate the continuing struggles of the unemployed in the United States. For the millions of Americans without a job, it's a depression, Biden said. My grandpop used to say there was a suburb of Scranton called Minooka. He said, when the guy in Minooka's out of work, it's an economic slowdown. When your brother-in-law's out of work, it's a recession. When you're out of work, it's a depression, Biden said. Well, it's a depression. It's a depression for millions of Americans through no fault of their own, he said. A recession is generally defined as a downturn in economic activity, usually marked by 2 or more consecutive quarters of declining GDP, and is less severe than a depression by economists' standards. And we have this article from World Socialist website. U.S. bankers cash in despite phony pay restraint. This is by Patrick Martin. The executive pay regulations announced Thursday by the Obama administration's pay czar and the Federal Reserve represent a cynical attempt to placate public outrage over Wall Street bonuses while allowing the financial speculators to continue awarding themselves multi-million-dollar compensation packages. According to the report issued by the Treasury Department's Special Master for Compensation, Kenneth Feinberg, at least 66 of the 138 bank and corporation executives under his jurisdiction will receive government-approved compensation packages totaling more than $1 million a year. The average pay for all 138 executives is $2.5 million a year. All of them work for 7 companies bailed out with tens of billions in taxpayer dollars. Bank of America, Citigroup, AIG, General Motors, Chrysler, GMAC, and Chrysler Financial. General Motors CEO Fritz Henderson will see his 2009 compensation more than double from 2008 to $5.5 million. Meanwhile, Under the forced bankruptcy of the company at the hands of the Obama administration, GM workers have suffered mass layoffs and deep cuts in pay and benefits. Feinberg's report and a second document issued by the Federal Reserve calling for vague new principles to guide compensation packages at the banks regulated by the Fed have been presented by both supporters and opponents in official circles as a serious check on the self-enrichment of the financial elite. The Wall Street Journal published an editorial denouncing the measures as the end of what used to be known as American capitalism. The Obama administration was happy to be accused of being anti-Wall Street. It gave the president a chance to adopt a populist pose and present himself as sharing the outrage over bankers' salaries felt by working people. I've always believed that our system of free enterprise works best when it rewards hard work, Obama said Thursday at the White House, but it does offend our values when executives of big financial firms, firms that are struggling, pay themselves huge bonuses even as they continue to rely on taxpayer assistance to stay afloat.